Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dana Connors. I'm the president of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our second in a four-part series focusing on STEM, the workforce development in Maine. And with my apologies, first order of business is to quiet my cell phone. Having done that, let's move on. Today we're going to focus on the untraditional fields of STEM, as well as the recruitment strategies accompanying that. We focus in a four-part series on science, technology, engineering, and math because of the value STEM brings to meeting our workforce needs, but also the economic success of the state, not to mention the opportunity it offers to those who choose STEM as a career. But STEM of today, in terms of the broader application of the types of businesses it serves, as well as those who choose STEM as a career, is different. It's expanding. It is no longer narrow in focus. It's not seen so much as the scientist in his or her lab. No, that's the older, more traditional view of STEM. Today, it has broadened, it's expanded, and it looks at those industries that you wouldn't think perhaps yesterday or the day before last year that it would apply. But yes, it does. And as we often say about those things that are part of the past that have moved on in today's terms, it's no longer your father's STEM. And all of that will come to life, really. And you know what I'm speaking of when we introduce our panelists and they share with us the topics for this workshop. So with that, I do want to turn it over to our moderator, General Counsel of the Chamber, but also the president of our foundation. But before I do that, I want to take just a moment to thank our sponsors because they are extremely valuable in being able to bring this series as well as this particular workshop to our attention. The Central Maine Power, the Eaton Peabody Attorneys at Law, Runman Winchell, who are also attorneys at law, MEMIC, as well as this STEM webinar is Science is Us. I've lost the screen, I'm going by memory, and I hope I've included the sponsors. If not, Ben, you can add to it. But let me close before I turn it off to you by saying, thank you for giving the Chamber this opportunity to share this most important issue today, as well as the last one, and we look forward to the next two. We thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to the program. Ben, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you everyone for joining us today in our second part in a series of our STEM workforce development here in the state of Maine. As Dana said, my name is Ben Gilman, and I serve as General Counsel for the Maine State Chamber of Commerce and also the president of our Education Foundation here at the Chamber. So just a couple quick housekeeping items before we get into the webinar itself and introductions of our panelists. But just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded, as you can see on your screen. And you're in listen only mode. If you want to ask a question, and we encourage asking questions, there's two ways to do it. You can raise your hand. There's a little icon. You can raise your hand. We'll recognize you to ask it. You can also, in the chat box, ask a question through the Q&A, and either myself or Andy Hackman, who's going to help moderate this session, will ask the question of the panelists. So we thank you for joining us today, and we're going to get right into it. And to introduce our panelists, we have Andy Hackman with Serlin Haley here joining us today. And Andy, you can introduce our first speaker on our panel.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Dana. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with the Chamber and be a part of this dialogue, and appreciate you guys being the foundation for us moving this series forward. Today, we're going to hear from a panel of 4 experts, both nationally and experts that we have here in Maine around STEM in non-traditional fields and fields that you might more reasonably think about STEM being involved in. They're going to give us recommendations and some best practices and perspective of their respective industries and ways that Maine can lead in the STEM field in developing our STEM workforce. We also are going to have a audience participation portion after our 4 expert speakers, so please stay on the line today and participate in our audience functionality. And we're going to get your perspective on STEM and also take that forward as we continue to have additional series opportunities and we develop a compendium of recommendations that come out of these STEM series. So we really appreciate everybody being on the line today, and hopefully we'll both all get some ideas and some recommendations, and we'll also be able to take the ideas and recommendations forward as we continue to work on developing STEM workforce here in the state of Maine. Our first speaker today is Rachel Karestas. She's Executive Director of the Science is Us campaign. She's a trained biologist and public policy analyst. Her career spans the worlds of advocacy, marketing, communications, having previously held executive positions in national nonprofit industry and leadership roles in consultancies, specializing in public affairs, brand development, and state and local government relations. Rachel's going to give us some perspective on how Maine is doing in STEM and where we have opportunities in the future. So Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Andy. And bear with me one moment, folks, as I get some slides up here on the screen. Okay. Okay, well, thank you all very much for participating today and for allowing me to join this panel. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I'm gonna maybe frame out a little bit of the broader conversation today by walking you through some research that we at Science is Us released at the beginning part of this year that gives us some specific information about what the STEM workforce looks like in Maine, and also some information about what that workforce looks like nationally. So we can also compare what's happening in Maine to what's happening in the national picture. For a moment though, because Science is Us is new, I'd like to introduce who we are so you understand who this information is coming from and why we're doing this. Science is Us is a foundation-supported initiative. We are fiercely nonpartisan. We work throughout the country, including in Maine, at the state and local level. And we are made up of a pretty diverse group of science and engineering associations. And we have a couple of representatives from higher education, industry, and labor organizations as well. And the thing that unites all of us are these two public policy goals that we're working towards. We've recognized in the science and engineering community that there's this systemic gap between policymakers and scientists and engineers. I think as we watch the COVID-19 pandemic play out, we're all kind of seeing that dynamic in real time. We'd like to try to bridge that gap because we think science and engineering have a lot to offer. Obviously, we're speaking on behalf of scientists and engineers, so maybe we're a little bit biased, but we think that science and evidence and engineering really have a role to play in helping policymakers make the best policy decisions. Science won't give you the answer, but it can help point you in the right direction. And we also think that science and engineering are bedrocks to the American economy and the American workforce. And to continue that and to keep the country competitive and growing and moving forward, we encourage robust support for research. And that's everything from obviously making sure that research is funded to things like intellectual property protection and good regulations and workforce development, making sure that there's good STEM education and also good pathways for people to engage in STEM professions, which is really the bulk of what we're talking about today. So to that research study that I mentioned, STEM in the American workforce is what it was called. And there's other folks that have tried to figure out how science and engineering impact the U.S. economy, academic institutions, government, et cetera. So there's no short of attempts to do this. What we did that was different, though, was to focus in on the people in STEM and the jobs that they do. So a lot of these analyses that look at how STEM contributes to the economy or how science and engineering drive the economy start by focusing on what kind of education people have and maybe what their degrees are in. But, you know, as Andy said in my bio, my undergraduate degree is in biology and my master's degree is in public policy. Well, that is not going to predict for you what kind of career I ended up having. And so instead of looking at people who have, you know, STEM degrees at the bachelor or postgraduate level, we took a look at what people do for their jobs. So the Department of Labor has hundreds and hundreds of job codes, and underneath each job code, they describe in detail the tasks that someone in that job completes. And sort of very simply, we determined, along with a team of economists, that if you spent 80% of your day, your working day, doing science, tech, engineering, math, and medicine, that defines you as a STEM professional. And that was you know, supplemented by other academic research in this space. So that's sort of how you can determine what's a STEM job and what's not. And when you do that, when you know, to take Dana's words and say, when you redefine that and say, this is not your father's STEM professional, it's not necessarily the person in the lab coat in the hospital or a professor or a Silicon Valley coder. Those are all STEM professionals and super valuable. But we get a much more interesting, robust, and inclusive view of who STEM professionals are, the kinds of jobs they have, and their educational pathways. And so I'll walk through some of that data. The way I thought I would do this is kind of start at like the big picture, the macroeconomic picture, if it were, start US and then show how it compares to Maine. So we'll go kind of big picture and then we'll get into Maine. So we'll kind of toggle back and forth between the two. So first, this probably shouldn't surprise anyone, but STEM has an outsized impact on the US economy as a whole. So when we take that broad view of direct, indirect, and induced contributions, we find that STEM supports 2/3 of US jobs, 69% of all state tax revenue, and 69% of US GDP. There really isn't any other sector of the economy that really supports as much of US jobs and GDP as STEM does. And it's similar in Maine, although a little bit less than what the US totals are. In Maine, we still find that STEM is the driver. The vast majority of STEM jobs in Maine are supported by STEM. 58% of Maine jobs are supported by STEM. $4.8 billion of Maine's state and local tax revenues are supported by STEM, and 61% of Maine's GDP. So while the numbers on the national side are a little bit higher, Maine is still obviously doing really well on STEM, as the majority of jobs and majority of the state's economy are being driven by STEM. So if we get from that macro picture into more of the direct picture, so how many of those folks who actually work in STEM jobs, that's the direct STEM employment. So at a national level, it's about 1/3 of all US jobs are direct STEM professionals, as we have counted them. So as I noted, folks who spend 80% of their time or more on science, tech, engineering, math, and medicine as what they do for their job. That's 1/3 of US jobs. If you recall, we said that STEM supports 2/3 of US jobs. So when you combine the micro and the macro, what that really means is that for every person in the US economy who is a STEM professional, they are creating the equivalent of one other full-time job in the economy. And that's the, all of the economic impacts that we all have, right? I go to the grocery store, I buy a car, I go to the movies. Well, I used to go to the movies, but all of those sorts of things that we do in the economy, STEM professionals have an outsized impact on job creation in non-STEM fields. And the same is true in Maine. The numbers here are almost identical. So 33% of US jobs are direct STEM, and 32% of the jobs in Maine are in STEM fields. And again, those STEM jobs in Maine are also creating other non-STEM jobs in Maine's economy at a much higher level. And I think the last thing as we get into who makes up this slice of the pie, and we talk about non-traditional STEM employment, is remember at the beginning I said we didn't filter based on education. We looked at what do people actually do. If I spend 80% of my time during the day doing math, that makes me a STEM professional. And what's really interesting about doing the analysis that way is that you find a much more interesting picture, a holistic picture of who STEM professionals are. So at the national level, what that means is that 6 in 10 of the STEM jobs in this country are held by folks without a bachelor's degree. That's a really large percentage of the STEM professionals in this country that are not the PhD scientists in the lab coat or the Silicon Valley coder that are those, first images potentially of STEM professionals that come to mind. And the number is exactly the same in Maine, or very close to being the same. It's 60%. So it's exactly 6 in 10 STEM professionals in Maine who do not hold a bachelor's degree. So who is that, right? Those advanced scientists and engineers with the advanced degrees absolutely are part of the field, but it also includes the electricians and the nurses and the radio operators and bookkeepers. It includes folks working in agriculture. And I know we're going to hear from Dr. Caldwell soon about, the wild blueberry industry in Maine and how STEM heavy that is. And I know we're going to hear from Bath Iron Works and all of the range of STEM professionals that work there at all ranges of education and career paths. So when we're thinking about STEM professionals and thinking about workforce development, our message on this is like, think broadly, think inclusively. All of these jobs provide wonderful opportunities for people, and they provide opportunities based on where people are in their development or their educational pathway. There's lots and lots of different ways to become a STEM professional, and we want to encourage people on those paths. Obviously, to have plenty of jobs for STEM professionals, we also have to make sure that the sciences and engineering are thriving. And so as I mentioned at the top, we believe there is a strong role for policy to play in advancing science and technology and making sure that folks see these pathways and also have access to the opportunities they need to have to get into STEM careers. I think broadly, STEM kind of has two ways to help lead Maine forward in the future. Okay, so in the short term, obviously mitigating the pandemic. There's a lot of really great research and development and industry work in Maine around vaccines and therapeutics. I know there's excellent work on testing happening in Maine as well, and the manufacturing of tests for COVID-19, contact tracing, epidemiology, and most of us are working from home these days, so all of the IT systems that allow things like Zoom to even exist in the first place, and the logistics. We're getting multiple deliveries at our house every day. I'm sure many of you are too. Well, on the back end, there's a tremendous amount of data science and logistical engineering that makes all of that happen and allow us to kind of get through this current crisis. And Maine is certainly leading in this space. And then there's the opportunity to build for the future. I think recognizing that you can have a successful STEM career regardless of where you fit on the educational pathway, regardless of what makes sense for you. My father was a mechanical engineer, and he worked as a mechanical engineer with an associate's degree. And folks today don't necessarily automatically think of that as the pathway forward. Other research has been done that demonstrates higher salaries for STEM professionals regardless of their level of educational attainment. So wherever you are on that scale, you're doing better than your peers of similar background if you're in a STEM profession. And then there's this innovation opportunity feedback loop. The more folks that are in STEM fields working in these areas, the more inventions we have, the more inventors we have, the more innovation we have. It's kind of a virtuous circle that kind of keeps things going, creates new jobs, and really just builds the economy of the future. I think there's a bunch of ways that folks in Maine can maximize these opportunities and maximize STEM. At the beginning, it starts with changing the conversation. There are a wide range of STEM jobs available in Maine today, regardless of your level of education. And we need folks to see all of those pathways and see them as equally valuable. Sometimes I use this analogy of a rocket ship, but maybe instead I'll use a destroyer because we're talking about Maine today. You need the PhD scientists and advanced engineers to design the radar systems and things, hydraulic engineers to make sure that those destroyers can float. But if you don't have the welders and the electricians and some of the other STEM professionals that are actually going to build the thing, that ship won't float. And so you need everybody in that continuum. They're all equally valuable to make STEM work. STEM really does have the potential to drive Maine's job market and the economy, and we think there's a great opportunity for Maine to take the lead by prioritizing STEM in education, by thinking smartly about workforce programs, economic development, and how public policy might fit into the whole picture. And that's the summary of our research. I will stop my screen sharing and hand it back over to Andy.
Rookie mistake there. Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate the presentation and the data. I think it's really something that helps highlight where we stand in Maine, and we're going to hear some more from some of the industries that you just talked about and get their perspective and their paths forward. So next on our panel is Dr. Lilly Caldwell. She is the University of Maine Cooperative Extension Wild Blueberry Specialist and Assistant Professor of Horticulture at the University of Maine. Dr. Caldwell's research and education programs aim to develop a whole system approach to wild blueberry production in Maine. Integrated pest management is at the forefront of her work, which can improve the economic and ecological resistance of farms by incorporating subjects such as fertility, soil health, plant physiology, into pest management. She partners with wild blueberry farmers in every aspect of their work and is going to talk to us a little bit about how STEM integrates into one of our traditional and wonderful industries here in Maine.
Thanks for the nice introduction. I'll share my screen with you all. There we go. Okay, so yep, my name's Lilly Caldwell, and these are pictures of all of the different things that we do in Maine Cooperative Extension. I am the wild blueberry specialist, so there's of course a blueberry picture here, but I want to touch on a bunch of different things that Extension does, but first I'll introduce myself. So my background, as was just mentioned, I have gone through the academic path, but it wasn't always clear to me that that was the right path to go down. So I grew up in Massachusetts, and I have a Bachelor of Arts in biology. I remember being told at one point, your grad school application won't be looked at unless you have a BS, a Bachelor of Science. That's just absolutely not true. So anyway, I majored in biology and I minored in environmental studies, and I didn't complete all the classes I needed for a minor in anthropology, but I was like halfway there, which looking back, it's very interesting to me that I did that, because so much of my work now in cooperative extension is social science, working with farmers, listening to farmers and hearing their needs, hearing their challenges, and then acting on it with our applied science. So it really is a combination of biology and anthropology. So then after college, I ended up working for the Massachusetts Audubon Society as a field research assistant, which was very fun, but it was also very isolated. I was tracking birds and turtles, trying to catch turtles out of a kayak, which was very fun, but I don't think I saw a single person all summer. So I realized from that experience that I did value people and engaging people in science. And therefore I started working for Earthwatch Institute, which is in Boston, as a student fellowship coordinator. And through these post-college experiences, I figured out that I did want to work for extension and work with farmers, bringing science from the university to farmers. And so I did get my PhD at the University of Vermont in plant and soil science. And then after my PhD, I worked for Cornell Cooperative Extension as a multi-county horticulture educator. So in Vermont, my experience was really working with field crop, grain growers and hop production, and pest management in those systems. And then as I worked for Cornell, I worked with New York State greenhouse growers and their pest management. So pest management, integrated pest management was really the story I was telling. The case I was able to make to UMaine was that I have all this pest management experience. I don't have wild blueberry experience, but here's my background. And so that, I think that's why, part of why I was hired for this job is because I have a well-rounded background in multiple different crops and education. So in my current job, wild blueberries, it is a crop we have of Maine. We have 485 farmers, and the crop is grown on 36,000 acres. And so, to say the least, my hands are full. I have a team of 4 to 5 people who work with me, and we do research and education. And it is applied research that directly relates to farmer needs. And the number one skill that I find useful is listening, having the ability to listen to farmers and their needs. So these are just 2 pictures. We in the field, we literally measure a lot of blueberry stems. We measure their height. We count the number of buds. We lay down mulch for different treatments. We apply different fertilizers for different treatments. So there's manual labor, absolutely. But then there's, fine motor skills where we're writing data on a data sheet and we're counting little tiny buds or counting little insects on leaves. But so this is all very impressive. My path of getting here, it was not always a straight line. And I think thinking about this presentation and this topic, it made me think back to my experience with STEM as a kid. And so I have a few things that were impactful to me as a kid. The first were take your daughter to work day and bring your parent to school day, which were memorable. Honestly, they sound easy, and that's a great thing that they are easy to do. But I do remember parents coming in and they had props, or like we went outside to plant a tree. And those were, you know, small things that I think are really easy to do. I was not a student who was very good at math at all. I was terrible at math. It made me so frustrated. And it really, that experience of frustration in the classroom made it so that I didn't consider science as something that I should do. But I think these experiences, school field trips, going to nature camp, and having internships were all things that connected science for me in a more real way, that was not painful math equations in the classroom. So connecting people, kids and young adults, to their natural world, or to the actual factory and what is actually happening on the ground in somebody's day-to-day job, was super helpful. And it really helped me shift my confidence from, oh, I would never consider science, to, oh, okay, I think I could fit in here somehow. So shifting gears to more broad extension. Extension is involved in STEM in many ways. 4-H is not the number one that comes to mind. The 4-H program is the youth development program of Cooperative Extension. And through this program, there are camps and learning centers where kids, thousands of kids, are learning hands-on topics that range across the board, from agriculture to nutrition and technology, leadership. There's a presentation competition they do. You know, there are so many really great hands-on, out of the classroom opportunities through 4-H. So that's one area. Another is the Beginning Farmer Resource Network. This isn't necessarily for kids, but young adults. We have Maine is the state with the most new and beginning farmers. And so those new and beginning farmers are scientists, or they're going to learn how to be. Farmers are scientists, and they often know more about their field than I do. They usually know more about it than I do. I'm there to learn and like walk them through a problem. So the Beginning Farmer Resource Network is a group, or it's really a website where a lot of our ag businesses and nonprofits, Humane Extension, have put resources for new and beginning farmers to find. So it's a beginning. I think this could really be expanded quite a bit to recruit and educate more young adults in farming. The other burgeoning industry that Extension is working on STEM in is aquaculture. So in aquaculture, currently there are a few great programs that are relatively new. There's a certificate in sustainable aquaculture, sorry. Certificate in sustainable aquaculture and Aquaculture Me, in addition to 4-H aquaponics. So kids and young adults are able to incorporate aquaculture into their career path now in a few different ways, but it could certainly be expanded. So the workforce needs, I was asked to come up with some workforce needs and gaps that I see, or we see in Extension. So the workforce needs from our perspective are really the need for more farmers on land and on sea, land managers, that could be in forestry or there's a few different ways in conservation, entrepreneurs, service providers, which could be agricultural service providers or forestry service providers, people who work in extension or NRCS or are crop consultants, for example. And then also the scientists, like myself or other people who are in the weeds. So given all of these careers, we really see that the future is in 4 categories, which are agriculture, aquaculture, forestry, and clean energy. And I will explain a few specific skill sets for each of those. But first, I also wanted to mention that we do need people with interdisciplinary experience, or at least the awareness that they are not only working in engineering, or they're not only a biologist. Like having the not being stuck in your silo can be really valuable, because we do so much interdisciplinary work. And in Maine, you know, it's a small state, it's a big state, but it's a small state. And inevitably, you'll be doing something that overlaps with another field, and it will just be so much easier for you to understand what they're talking about or their needs, if you have this more, if you're taking a wider lens. So for example, in biology, the biology in blueberry production is growing the plant in the field, and soil and plant health are important. But then when we start to harvest the crop, we really need people who know how to fix farm machinery and know how to make a blueberry processing line more efficient, how to pack berries so that they maintain their quality. These are all challenges that we're currently working on, and that development of product won't stop. We also then need people to bring these new products to market. So marketing and product distribution are huge, and that's where the social sciences really come in, and business management, which requires a lot of math and a lot of budgeting. You know, farms have real business plans, and they've got to work for the farmers to stay in business. Okay, so the specific skill sets for agriculture would be, a basic level to advanced on a scale under these topics, which are plant biology, agronomy, which is like nutrient and pest management, entomology, insects, plant pathology, plant disease, and business management. The ability to fix farm equipment. I can't overstate how important this is. And, we need agricultural engineers. And each farmer kind of becomes an ag engineer themselves, because they've got to figure out how to fix the tractor on their own if they want to plant their crop. It just seems like equipment is always breaking, and there are small scale farms in Maine, not tiny, but a solid sized farm that we would still consider a small farm, and they need smaller scale equipment that is tailored to their size. A lot of the equipment is built for large cornfields or very large blueberry fields, whereas we have some smaller growers who just can't quite use that equipment. They need to adjust it or tweak it a little bit to make it into something they can use. Then farm water management knowledge. As we move into the future, and currently, we are seeing an increase in flooding and an increase in drought conditions on farms. And so farm water management is going to be very important to both extremes, either flooding or drought. as I mentioned, marketing and product distribution are absolutely critical. There's no point in growing a crop if you can't sell it. And that in itself is so important to hear. It's, you know, some people get into farming because they want to feed themselves, they want to feed their community, which is great, but the skills in marketing are really, really required, especially these days. And then the last one is precision agriculture. And by precision agriculture skills, I mean technology and automation. As farms move into the future, it really is a technological future. And we have weather stations on farms now. We have models that predict when a certain insect pest will emerge and therefore be a problem. We have water sensors in the soil that will indicate when a grower should irrigate. So these are all details of agriculture that are technology now, and they can be automated. So having people who know technology and know new technology and how to implement it will be important. Problem solving, absolutely. I think I have problem solving on every slide. Okay, moving along, aquaculture skill sets. I want to thank my colleagues for helping me out with these. From their perspective, fish, shellfish, seaweed, biology, and culture are very important skills to have. If anyone is going to start out in these fields or wants to work in these fields, knowing the culture of the organism they're going to grow is really important. Basic plumbing and electrical skills, because a lot of the future of aquaculture is in land-based recirculating systems. So water management, plumbing, electrical is all really important. Problem solving, absolutely. Inevitably, there's going to be a leak or frozen pipe, and figuring out what to do is really important. So hands-on experience with aquaculture early on would, spark some students' interest, I think, and having some exposure to it may make them think, oh, I could possibly fit into this field. Moving on to forestry. Extension doesn't do a lot in forestry right now, but we do have students in 4-H start to learn some of these skills. So sustainable stand management, water and erosion management are very important in addition to forest biology. Sustainable wood and sustainable wood products are in high demand. And you know this, but Maine, it has this excellent opportunity, and it's just is how it is. It's a big state. We're the state in the Northeast that has a lot of water, and we have a lot of land. So we are the resource for our neighboring states. So forestry management is going to be very important. Some of the other skills would be basic surveying and timber sales. And again, problem solving. And last one, clean energy skill sets would be the actual construction, again, surveying and installation of solar, wind, any clean energy that you think of, but also making homes more efficient and installing insulation in homes and buildings, workplaces. Basic plumbing and electrical skills again. And being able to adapt to changing technology. It seems like, especially in this field, but also the agricultural technology, they're changing so quickly that it will take students who are adept at learning new systems to really tackle this. And so those are basic skills. There also is a need for advanced engineering here, as you know, and as Maine has a big hand in. So here again, communication skills and problem solving are really important. I guess I have put problem solving on here so many times because in my work, I run into it all the time. And so as an ag service provider myself, and working with farmers, both sides, the actual person doing the work and me doing research and education, there are neighbors who need to be contended with. There are policies going through that might not match what you're doing on the farm or what your goals are in your business. And so being able to communicate those needs to people who are in the legislature is really important. But also just on your property, finding ways to work with your neighbors, work with your fellow farmers, and you know, when a problem comes up, you've got to have the skills to pull on to be able to say, okay, well, this doesn't make sense now. We're going to shift gears and head in this other direction. So in conclusion, my last slide is just to summarize. So we need people with skills, with people skills, and in addition to computer proficiency. So both in-person and online skills. I think we all have a renewed appreciation for each other and the person-to-person interactions. And I think Mainers especially value that interaction and hands-on work. So a combination of hands-on and computer skills are going to be good. And then it just going through this, it seems to me that involving students, kids, all the way up through adults or young adults, the more we can include them along their path with hands-on science or STEM topics, the better off we'll all be. So in the beginning, just continuing to have STEM at camps and learning centers. Then as they move along, you know, having a lot of school field trip opportunities, and then internship pipelines to help them further their understanding of certain STEM opportunities and make some connections. And then also having basic trade programs through the technical colleges as they move towards a career, and these certificate programs for specific industries. Especially, you know, at aquaculture is a great example. It's kind of come on quickly in Maine, and having a certificate program is fantastic. It's faster for us to make, and it allows people to really learn a lot, to have an internship included in that certificate, and then be more prepared for their later career. So the other point I just wanted to touch on is that we all need to work on ways to include all Maine youth, and we try to do this in extension as much as we can, but there's still people we're missing. There's still people who don't know what extension is. So I think we all just have to work a bit harder to include all the students in Maine, of all different ethnicities and all different economic levels. So it really just comes back to exposure. And as I had exposure to science, I was able to say, okay, I am capable of doing this. So experiential learning is the best. Okay, that's it. Feel free to reach out to me, ask any questions, or check out the Extension STEM page. Reach out to anybody in Extension. We'll be happy to connect you, and we'll get you to the right person. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Caldwell. Appreciate that, and definitely some recommendations and ideas that we'll continue to move forward and recommend as this initiative helps try to deliver on making the structure that helps create a stronger workforce in this area. Next up on our panel, we've got Allison Coombs, who is the Director of Human Resource Services for General Dynamics and Bath Iron Works. Obviously an industry that's near and dear to the heart of all Mainers. She's responsible for the daily operations of BIW Human Resource Services organization, which includes payroll, benefits, training, organization, development, and talent acquisition. Allie was working as a construction laborer at Chinbro in 1999 when she transitioned to human resources. At the time she left Chinbro after 18 years, she was human resources manager for the power and electrical business unit. She started at BIW as the manager of salary administration in 2017 and added payroll manager to her responsibilities the following year. I was promoted to BIW Human Resources Director of Services this past April. She has a degree in Business and Human Resources Management from Southern New Hampshire University, and we really appreciate having her. I know that she's come out of union negotiations and just direct workforce issues that we all focused on and talking about. So we just appreciate, Allie, that you were able to join us and just give us some perspective. So thanks for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I do apologize. I don't have a presentation like Andy just said. I just landed back in my office. I've been out for 2 weeks with union negotiations. All went really well. So that's good news. So, but I did still want to participate in this today, regardless, because the topic of workforce development and STEM is really important to me. As Andy mentioned, on the professional side, I am the Director of HR at Bath Iron Works, and I've been here about 3.5 years. Before that, I was a laborer. I started as a laborer 18 years ago or so, or 20 now, I think, 21, at Chinbro, and then slowly got into recruiting and then staffing, training, org development, went back to school myself, ended up as an HR manager there when I left. That's the professional side. On the personal side, I have a 19-year-old son who's currently a freshman in the marine engineering program up at Maine Maritime Academy. So shortly after this, I'm gonna have to head up there and get him because they just went to full remote learning, which kind of stinks, but we're lucky they got as much in person this semester as possible. And then I have a daughter who is a senior in high school and just this past Tuesday committed to the marine transportation program at Maine Maritime. So she's going to be heading there in the fall. So needless to say, STEM is near and dear to my heart, both professionally, but also personally. You know, when I'm talking about the importance of the STEM background to our business at Bath Iron Works, STEM, really provides our employees with a much deeper understanding of the physical world that we have to manipulate when we take our basic materials and raw materials and transform them into the complex and extremely sophisticated systems that we here refer to as surface combatants, but everybody else just calls them ships. So at Bath Iron Works, obviously STEM and the STEM background is in pretty much everything we do here. We have many job opportunities that correspond directly with the STEM disciplines. Science, for example, career opportunities in industrial health, environmental science, material science. We have a full medical department here. So, doctors, nurses, x-ray technicians, But then we also have our environmental health and safety department. But the thing that, and that's kind of common, you might think of with science, but then we have welders and brazers and electricians, blasters, all of those jobs have a huge science component to them that people don't often consider or think about. On the technology side, careers and jobs and manufacturing process, forming, cutting, joining, the automation that we're getting into now with the technology, robotics and digitally controlled technologies, the systems that we have to put into these ships, the complexity of them is huge. And again, inspection processes that we use, the surveying that we do, the designers now have new technologies that they use to design the ships, which then leads into the engineering side. Obviously, that's a much easier fit when you think about STEM and designing and building ships is the engineering. We employ over 200 engineers that work across the engineering, design, production, facilities. Without design and engineering, we wouldn't really, we wouldn't know what to build or how to build it. So obviously that's critical to our business. And then, mathematics, quite frankly, that's across just about everything we do here at Bath Iron Works, including, HR. A lot of people don't think about HR being in a STEM type of career, but, in my world, I manage payroll, which is hugely mathematics. I have budgets to manage, benefits, pensions, 401ks, and then outside of HR, there's the finance department, there's estimating. And then again, in the trades themselves, which is people just don't think about as being STEM, pipe fitters, electricians, crane operators, they've got to manage their load charts. They've got to know how to do this stuff. So, for Bath Iron Works, STEM is critical. I mean, it is our workforce. And shipbuilding in general right now is super competitive. Every shipyard out there is trying to improve their efficiencies and their product qualities. They're deploying really complex technologies, and our employees have to have the STEM background to keep up with some of those things. And implementing and utilizing, and in some cases, developing and designing those technologies. So, when I talk about why it's important to me and important to BIW, I mean, that's really our workforce, right? So, one of the questions that I was asked to really talk to was the challenges that I see and we see here in finding the right STEM skilled workers. And really our biggest challenge, and it's been a challenge for as long as I've been doing this, is availability. STEM candidates are in high demand throughout our state, throughout the country. So this, in my opinion, the shortage is a result of the fact that still many scholastic environments don't have the capacity or the resources necessary to familiarize students with the connection between personal interests and the coursework and then the corresponding career opportunities. And I'll take my daughter just as a prime example. If it wasn't for me, I guess, pushing and understanding the opportunity out there for women in the STEM industry, marine, any construction, marine engineering, it's not something that is greatly pushed from within our education system. She wants to be a captain of a ship. That's not a traditional job for a woman. It's getting there, we're getting there. But I think that we still lack some of that connection between these non-traditional STEM careers and you know, how we can educate kids and getting them involved and getting them to understand what's really out there for opportunity. There's just so much opportunity out there. You know, for us, you know, I've found that really hitting the 8th grade through the 12th graders, that's where that seed really starts to get planted, and developing the interests and understanding what's out there for STEM. BIW participates in a number of programs that support, you know, career shadowing, going to the schools to talk directly to the students about the opportunities, getting, you know, some academic exposure. You know, we're hugely involved in programs like Job for Maine grads, in the VOC programs, the Job Corps, even all the way up to the community tech colleges. We've got to just continue to get out there and continue to educate kids. And Dr. Calderwood said it best, you know, from the very beginning, all the way down to, you know, kindergarten, and getting them to understand that these career paths, although non-traditional, are lucrative. There's a lot of them, and they're a great opportunity. And that's what we're trying to do at Bath Iron Works with some of our programs. You know, internally, we also have we have an apprenticeship program that you know, partners with Maine Maritime Academy. We have a professional development program. We have our engineering development program. You know, we just, as far as org development, we're really, really embracing and taking the STEM backgrounds and trying to bring them more and more into our environment. The future workforce, you know, I've asked about that. The future workforce has got to be nimble. They have got to be ready. I think I heard it a few times on this. They've got to be problem solvers. They've got to be able to adapt to change like that. Technology changes so fast. They really need to be able to make those changes. And you know, our employees with those STEM backgrounds, which again, even on the jobs that you don't even think about being a STEM job, is pretty much everybody we've got here, they're able to keep up with those changes. So, you know, BIW will always have a mix of trade workers and you know, technologists, as I call them. And they work together with their talents to build the ships that we build, which are Bath built is best built. And we need to continue, you know, looking at how we can, you know, through education, through workforce development, keep the STEM, you know, alive, and get more people involved in the STEM and get them to understand what a great opportunity it is. So you know, that's really all I have to say. I don't have a big, nice presentation, but I am passionate about it and thrilled to participate in these panels. So thanks.
And Allie, appreciate your passion. It definitely comes through, and congratulations to your graduates and returning home from the academy, at least for a period of time here. So we're honored to have.
I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if I'm ready for it again, but thank you.
I don't know if we all are. So and please, everybody, should have mentioned from the beginning, note your questions. We're going to get to questions for the entire panel here at the end of our fourth speaker. So please feel free to jot those in the chat box now, or hold on to them for when we conclude a fourth speaker. But we are going to have the opportunity for some questions here as we finish off the panel and move into the audience participation forum. So thank you. And we're our final speaker to sort of cap things off and to show us a bit more of the path and how employers and employees might be able to get some of that training that we've talked a lot about. We've got Maria McDougall, College Access Counselor with the Finance Authority of Maine, or FAME. Maria joined FAME's College Access team with nearly a decade of financial aid experience. She holds a Master's of Education in Adult Higher Education and a Bachelor's in English. As a college counselor, Maria helps students and families from 8 central Maine counties plan and pay for higher education, as well as develop financial literacy skills. Maria also assists Maine's adult learners through the college finance process and personal finance achievement. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about the All Fund Leaders program, something new that folks can take advantage of, and also give us perspective just across the spectrum on accessing higher education in this area. So Maria, take it away.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm actually, funny enough, happy to go last because I think a lot of what was said today, which was wonderful by my fellow panelists, will kind of flow throughout my presentation. Allie, if your students need FAFSA assistance, contact me. Congratulations on your senior in high school making a plan. There's not a lot of college planning going on right now. There's a lot of uncertainty, so I'm always excited to hear when students have made their final plans. As Andy said, I do not have a STEM degree. I am more in the humanities, liberal arts side of things, but my profession leads me to learning about all sorts of different credentials and things like that. And so our work is about sort of encouraging education after high school, whatever that looks like, multiple pathways to earn credentials of value that provide good paying jobs for all Maine people. That's pretty much FAME's mission. I think it was Dr. Caldwell who mentioned being terrible at math, also same, even though I work at the Finance Authority. So STEM for me sort of felt out of reach, but I think if I had had some of that early aspirational intervention about some of these sort of things on the edges, I might have gone down a different path. So it's been really wonderful to kind of hear the language and kind of think outside the box related to this. So I'm going to talk about kind of some things specific regarding Alpha on Leaders, but with an undertone of thinking about educational planning and what this means and credential attainment. You know, I was stunned by Rebecca's fact about 6 in 10 STEM jobs are held by folks with less than a bachelor's degree. So we spend so much time trying to shatter the myth of 4-year public-private education as the only pathway to success. So I can't wait to use that factoid in some of what we do to encourage students to do whatever pathway beyond high school diploma that makes sense for them. Oh, going too quick. So Maine's economy is shifting. This is nothing new for anyone on the call, I'm sure, and has been hit upon today, but our economic profile was kind of traditional manufacturing and natural resources, but 1 in 7 jobs over the next decade are going to be in STEM related fields. That's just the way that we're moving. And so one of the other reasons that sort of Alpha on Leaders came to be was in relationship to student debt. So one of FAME's big sort of target issues, if you will, related to advocacy and the work that we do is related to student debt. It's no surprise that that is one of the nation's primary concerns, as well as on a macro level in Maine. And I'm going to hit on some other things towards the end related to this, but we graduate our bachelor's degree holders with the 6th highest level of debt in the nation. So we're not, you know, number 1, but we're also top 10. And so we really felt the need to kind of answer this call, and you know, lots of states are sort of doing different work to try to kind of respond to this issue. I don't know that there's a great solve for this without going too far down a political rabbit hole, but suffice it to say that with the shifting economy, the student debt levels, and our responsibility to Mainers, this is kind of how the Alpha on Leaders program came to be. So the program, kind of what is Alpha on Leaders? So the idea is to provide student loan debt reduction payments. So essentially contribute to paying off a student's loan debt. So we're, you know, they're a competitively selected group of Maine workers, and I'm going to get to sort of the how of this shortly. Working in occupations or capacity involving STEM skills, background, education, disciplines, or other requirements. So the thing here is the organization, company, etc. itself does not necessarily need to be a STEM organization, but it's a position within a STEM organization, you know, within any organization that's specific to STEM. So it's your IT professional in a school. It is, you know, potentially an engineer working at some, you know, particular college or things like that. So it's about the particular occupation, not necessarily the organization or larger company as a whole. And we call these participants Alphon leaders because part of the fun, you know, this is in partnership with the Alphon Foundation. So you're going to hear me talk about Alphon leaders. This is that selected group. That's how we refer to them. So the Alphon Leaders program is open to individuals who are either residents of Maine or will become residents of Maine. So this is a great sort of come here, live here kind of tool to say, like, we've got this opportunity if you're willing to relocate. That are or will be employed by a Maine-based employer in a STEM occupation. So it can't be, you know, the organization or company doesn't have to be STEM itself, but it does have to be based in Maine. And you'll see there's sort of the definition of that over to the right. They do have to have a higher education degree or a certification. So that we say higher ed degree, not necessarily college, because again, we're big on the pathway and what does that look like and what does it mean to have a credential, but they do have to have education beyond high school. They have to have student indebtedness incurred in connection with obtaining their education, right? So federal, you know, federal and or private student loan debt related to earning that degree or credential. And it was expanded this year to include soon to be graduates. So people towards the end of their credential pathway can also apply for the program. Okay, so the Alphon leaders, this is sort of how it works. They receive debt reduction payments made on their behalf directly to the lender. So there's no sort of money changing hands directly to the participants. So the payments are made on their behalf in 2 disbursements. So the first is made after 3 years of living in Maine and working in that STEM field. And the second is made after year 6. So part of this comes with a commitment to live and work here and to really be focused on Maine's economy and Maine's path forward in the STEM fields. The maximum sort of debt reduction is the lower of 50% of their outstanding debt or $60,000. Okay, so a significant portion. There's a piece of me that's like, man, should have gone into STEM because I could really use $60,000 worth of student loan reduction. But it's a significant amount, and it's, you know, as far as reducing sort of the overall burden of debt, having 50% of that reduced is a huge thing and should not go unnoticed for sure. Okay, so how this is sort of determined, there's an advisory committee. So it's made up of sort of higher, you know, folks in education and folks in business. And they provide leadership by advising the foundation and FAME. They assist in the selection and they actually make recommendations for a slate of candidates. So here's these folks we think are, you know, based on the applications. And it's, you know, Maine businesses and education leaders. The chair is Melissa Smith, the CEO of WEX. So it's a group of both, you know, education and business professionals, because that's what FAME does. And this is kind of a program that works at the intersection of both of these things. So individuals are recruited from across the nation and internationally. Again, it's sort of bring people here, convince them to work in Maine in these growing fields. The advisory committee kind of determines the recruitment focus based on the following. So is the industry which they work sort of transformative? What is it doing for the Maine economy on either a micro or macro level? Positions which are in high demand and or difficult to fill. So, you know, somebody in a really sort of niche skill set might be a recruited candidate for this particular program. And of course, the needs of economically depressed areas of the state. So, you know, some of this location matters in terms of what's going on. I keep thinking about the farming and how rich Maine's communities are in terms of farming. And I'm sure a lot of folks in those industries wouldn't necessarily consider themselves STEM, as we've heard. I wouldn't necessarily consider applying to this program, but I imagine that they would be great candidates. So here's how the application process works. There's 2 application cycles per year. while the funds are available. I don't have like a hard and fast sort of end date for this. We hope to be able to continue it. So the application cycle for this fall, we are kind of nearing the end of this deadline, so September 15th through November 15th. So we're coming up on that end deadline. And so the application looks like this. It's the program application, including a written essay and a resume. A statement of intent to live and work in Maine for 6 years, because again, there's that commitment to remain here in that employer. The employment certification by a Maine employer, and disclosure of the amount, source, and terms of student indebtedness. So paint us the picture. Is it federal student loan debt? Is it private student loan debt? What are the amounts? All of that, and all of that is regularly available to students. And they should hopefully be looking at it anyway as they're going through. And then if the advisory committee sort of wants more information than the paper profile, they can request to interview particular candidates. So sometimes that is part of the process. As far as selection, the committee sort of recommends a qualified pool of candidates and says, you know, here's the folks we're looking at. And then again, they might do an interview. But in addition to that, the selection will focus on their record, so their academic and extracurricular record, their qualifications as a STEM professional, and again, the transformative nature of the industry in which they work. They will be deemed to be of high quality, both personally and professionally, and to have STEM careers of importance to the Maine economy. So these are like cream of the crop in this space that are working in transformative STEM careers that are really going to boost the Maine economy. So here's a little data for you just to kind of put this into perspective. So there have been 155 Alphon leaders awarded since 2017. So that's 155 people that have had some of their student debt burden relieved. The total sort of amount of that dollar-wise is $4.8 million. And the average sort of individual amount is about $31,000. So this is a very impactful funding program for this group of participants that are working towards helping Maine's economy in the STEM fields. So the information provided here today and our frequently asked questions, sort of how do I apply, what do I need to know, is available at alphonleaders.org. We have a great frequently asked questions section there. I see the chat is going, so hopefully we'll get to some of these questions, but full disclosure, I'm not in the advisory committee. I sort of talk about this as a program, so if there's something I can't answer for you today, I'm going to make sure you have an answer moving forward. But that's also a great place to get information. It's right on our website. The frequently asked questions section, I go there when folks ask me questions usually. And so one of the things that's important about this for employers and why you need to know is that this can be a great recruitment tool, right? So if you're like, come to Maine, they'll be like, why Maine? It's cold, it's snowing, I don't know, I don't like it, why bother? We are, I was thinking about in the beginning, let's be a leader, let's take the lead. And this is one of those programs where Maine is kind of taking the lead and saying like, okay, we're going to work on, both increasing our STEM work and moving this forward and helping with student debt reduction. So we're kind of taking the lead in both of these ways. And so this can be one of those recruitment tools that can really make an impact on employers as well. Certainly it's very competitive and it's sort of, there's very particular parameters, but it's an attractive carrot to dangle, particularly in some of these STEM fields that don't necessarily scream that they're STEM fields. And it related to that, this is sort of kind of transitioning into thinking sort of bigger about this from an educational standpoint. We often work with employers, so we have an employer outreach group. A lot of the work I do with Maine's Adult Ed is around, career planning and how education plays into that. And we do a lot of work with employers about sort of offering our services to help their employees with X, Y, and Z, student loan repayment, paying for college, all of that. But we also talk about sort of thinking about offering educational incentives, right? So inform potential employees of the available state programs, Alpha on Leaders. We also have the Educational Opportunity Tax Credit, also known as Opportunity Maine, through Live and Work in Maine. And there is a STEM component to that too. So there's, related to undergraduate, and this is a tax credit that can be used to, offset. And, it's not just for STEM. I can claim it too, even with my humanities degrees. And it acts as a pretty good offset, but a pretty decent credit depending on how everything works out. So another just sort of statement for employers to say, like, Maine is doing the work to both increase jobs in this field and to provide incentive to work at them. So I think Opportunity Maine is another one of those things that kind of flies under the radar. So we're constantly letting people know, like, hey, take advantage of this great tax credit. And so from a recruitment standpoint, offering those things and offering student loan repayment. So the CARES Act legislation allowed for up to $5,250 in student loan repayments made by employers on behalf to be tax-free for 2020. And so I've worked with a number of businesses and organizations who are like, how can we get more people? And I say, do you offer, tuition assistance or tuition reimbursement or student loan repayment? And they go, well, no, I didn't think about that. So that's one of those things, especially for current college students who are planning sort of what's my next step. And a business, an agency, an organization that's going to offer some kind of offset to either continue their education or help pay for what they've already done is going to be a huge draw for those particular students. So just kind of thinking about making these programs known if you're looking for recruitment in these areas. Just a few other things. There are many and local national scholarships that focus on STEM. So it's, one of the things we talk about is sort of, if a student says, I need money to help pay for college. And my question is, okay, what are you planning on studying, right? And so I think there's a misconception that that scholarships don't exist and it's really hard to pay for college. The money's out there. You sort of just have to do the work. And so before they get to the point where they have debt to pay off and need things like Alpha on Leaders and need things like the Opportunity Maine tax credit, we want to talk about, making the affordable decision and building your list of colleges and doing the math and saying, okay, this is financially too much of a stretch. This is kind of right in my sweet spot. And then looking for scholarships. And there are so many, particularly for women and people of color in STEM. And so as you're connecting with young adults in particular, like, encourage exploration of these and talk about these wonderful sort of aquaculture is so cool. Every time I learn something new about that, I'm like, that is such a neat field. And I just think it's awesome. And so I have a number of young women who are pursuing sort of alternative degrees and alternative careers. And it's sort of weird that we have to call them alternative, but in a particularly male-dominated field, it's important to make that distinction. And so there's lots of programs and funding out there for women in these particular fields to kind of boost that. So just have those conversations. And then, of course, the things we've heard all day about reminding them that STEM doesn't always mean working in a lab and doing research. And I certainly used to think that way for a long time. Even before the acronym, scientists, they just work in a lab all day. And the early intervention, I think, Allie mentioned it, pretty much everyone that has spoken today on this panel has talked about sort of the early intervention, the discussions of aspirations at the earliest possible levels. I went to Islesboro Central School last fall. What is time? It's pandemic. I think it was last fall. And I spent the whole day. So they have K-12 in one building. And, I went into started with the juniors and seniors to get them going on what their pathway was going to look like. And then I spent time in the K-3 classrooms, doing a little color book and like, what does Johnny want to be when he grows up? And talking about, hearing like what you want to be when you grow up. And aside from like professional athlete and YouTube star, you still hear things like astronaut and, scientist. I actually had a little girl say she wanted to be a paleontologist. And I was like, that's cool, do that. What a great job. So I think that there are ways that you can start having these conversations to build the aspirations. And then, as they're planning for their education beyond high school, it becomes clear and it helps them plan and make an informed decision about where they're going to pursue education after high school and how they're going to pay for it. We've also heard about the multiple pathways. So I'm not sure how many are familiar with the Maine Spark initiative, but in reality, we need 60% of Mainers to have a credential of value by 2025 in order to sort of keep the momentum of our economy going. Right, the last number I saw, we were right around 46, 48%. So we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. And credential of value is one of those sort of semantic words. What does that mean? But really it's about an employable, potentially stackable credential. And so we are big at pathways. I've worked in financial aid for a long time, both at public and private colleges. And so my role is sort of making sure that they're paying for those particular institutions. At FAME, we get to, we're Switzerland, we're neutral. So I'm like, let's talk about whatever pathway works for you. Is that community college to start with? Is that four-year college? The path, someone said, the path isn't linear. Nobody's path is. And so we have to shatter a lot of the stigmas about things like community college, which is why I'm so excited about the figure that we got in the beginning about 6 in 10 STEM jobs that are held by people with, an associate's degree, presumably, or a certificate. We still have some of that sort of trades stigma in all reality. We speak to lots of high school students and parents, and I had a dad say, I don't want my kid to go to community college because that's college for kids that can't hack it. And I was sort of stunned and, had to regroup myself. And we're still dealing with the sort of junior college stigma around credentials that aren't necessarily a bachelor's degree. And so really talking about multiple pathways and exploring those trades related to, STEM fields, I think is a great way to make a financially affordable decision, as well as to really build some of those stackable credentials and to get people working in these fields that that we've heard all day about sort of gaps and starting the momentum. It can, a certificate program or an associate's degree can feel like an attainable baby step for some folks versus trying to go right into a 4-year program and not realizing success. One of the other things you can do is invite us to come speak at your organization, maybe in person someday, but right now we're doing all of our work virtually. We're doing a number of lunch and learns on particular topics, so we can come talk about Alpha on Leaders, or we can talk about the Next Gen Education Savings Program. So the idea of that is about building aspirations and a college-going identity from birth. And we have matching grants in place, and you can use it in any accredited education program anywhere in the country. And so we are happy to come talk about sort of student loan repayment and college planning and looking for scholarships and all of these important educational aspects related to pursuing a career in the STEM fields. So I'm going to end there with with our information about how to contact us. Tons of education resources on our website. But if you just go to the search bar and type in Alpha on Leaders, you'll find, or go to alphaonleaders.org, you'll find that specific information. Do feel free to reach out to me directly and to also connect with us on social media.
Excellent. Well, Maria, thank you for walking us through the program and all of your tremendous outreach efforts. It's clearly making an impact with future generations and folks now. So appreciate your work on that. And we're already seeing questions, so probably some for you and some for the whole group. But the first one is for Maria. It says, you may have covered this, but are current employees who are recent graduates eligible for the Alpha Leaders program?
Yes, you can be, recently graduated or really not that recently graduated. The change was that they added a soon to be graduated component to the program, but you can currently be sort of gainfully employed working in a STEM field, the STEM occupation, no matter when you graduated.
Very good. It looks like we've got more of a comment from Jeremy Qualls at University of Southern Maine, but Jeremy, I don't know if you want to speak. We'll try to ask you to unmute here, but anything you want to add?
No, it was very inspiring. It was awesome, actually. I was in and out, but I caught most of everything, and it just really wants me, it inspires me to dig in and really nourish what we've got growing here. There's so many of these programs I wasn't even aware of. It's brand new to me, and I'm like, wow, that blew me away. So Anyway, so I'm Jeremy Qualls. I'm the Dean of the College of Science, Tech, and Health at the University of Southern Maine, and I welcome everyone. Thank you. It's pretty awesome.
Thanks, Jeremy. All right, let's see, we've got another question. Looks like it's for the whole group, but what can we do as employers to promote the word STEM in our recruiting advertising? With Dead River Company, and we have a service technician opportunities and to focus specifically on trades. There's still a stigma out there. We also look for CDL-B drivers that are in demand across the state. So any recommendations from the panel on how to promote the word STEM in recruitment and advertising? Thoughts on that?
I'll add a few things. I think obviously you can use the word STEM if you're promoting STEM jobs. I think there is a little bit of a recognition gap in some ways of people who are STEM professionals but don't necessarily know that they are. Science is Us also has a social media campaign called People of Science that features stories, personal stories of all of these folks. And we often find people that participate in that and say, oh, I didn't think of myself that way, particularly in some of the trades and in skilled labor. So I think it's a bit of a process. You can start using STEM. We've also found talking about science and engineering especially, and using a variety of that terminology and how you approach the various jobs and job postings does help to kind of begin to shift people's mind frame on, these being STEM jobs. But it's not going to happen in just one ad. It's sort of something that we have to all do kind of over and over and over again.
Very good. Let's see. We've got another question here. Always looking to collaborate with industry and getting our summer STEM camps programs collaborated with workforce development. Please feel free to outreach. USM, Thomas Bickford, I see you're on here. So we'd love to expand our extensive summer program. So happy to make connections through the forum. So feel free to jump on that. Let's see, another question here. I think this one is for Allie in terms of at BIW. For openings that you have now or have had recently, have you been able to fill those opportunities, or is there a lack of the right skill set coming in the door?
We haven't been able. I mean, we have right now our hiring through the end of next year is about 1,500 more employees. Primarily in the trades, but again, the trades aren't typically thought of as a STEM career, but they absolutely are. And no, we are, I won't say struggling, we're getting there, but we could definitely use, everybody getting the word out that the opportunities here are huge. And really, once you get your foot in the door here, the opportunities personally are huge. I mean, you can start as a laborer and end up as a superintendent or, a director here. It's just, Bath Iron Works has, a lot of professional development opportunities. And so, we have a lot of open positions, and we're tackling it in all different avenues. The pandemic hasn't helped us with recruiting a lot this year. We can't hit some of the large events that we like to hit, but we're out there. We've got our ads going, and we'll talk to pretty much anybody that's interested in a job here. So,
great, thanks, Allie. Let's see here. Another one, I think, for Maria. In terms of the off-on program, do you have goals within the program for four-year degrees or more vocational trades degrees, or how does the selection board think about development in both spaces?
That's a great question. I think, again, the real key is sort of the transformative nature of the particular industry. I think the credential matters a little bit less. and so that's, I think, I don't know that there's like benchmarks of like, we want X number of, associate's degrees or trade folks versus, advanced degrees or anything like that. But I do think it's sort of about the specific industry and role within a particular organization, from a larger sort of economic perspective. I don't think that there are certain measurables, it's more about what funding is available. Certainly we look at the credentials and the academic history and all of those things, but I think that sort of comes secondary to sort of the bigger holistic picture. I hope that answered the question.
Nope, I think it did. Hopefully it did. We'll see. If not, post another question. If I didn't ask it right, or if I'm paraphrasing in the wrong way, feel free to jump in and ask it in a better way for me to understand. Let's see, another question here. It looks like it's for everybody in terms of awareness. Are you aware of work being done at the high school level, guidance counselors, as we are looking to expand the definition of what falls under STEM to those folks in middle and high school? So maybe Maria, you might have some perspective first on that, but happy to have truly everybody on the panel jump in here and offer some thoughts.
Yeah, I think, a shout out to school counselors, because especially right now they are doing the Lord's work and they are very busy and they are inundated and overwhelmed. And so we are constantly trying to make sure that they know that we're available. But that said, it kind of varies school to school and even district to district in terms of how they're able to have those kinds of conversations. Some programs do really great in sort of career and college planning, and we'll have an entire course. And then some, it's sort of once you hit junior year, you have to go talk with your guidance counselor and sort of come up with the plan. I will sort of shout out Lake Region High School and that group, because they're fortunate on their site. They have the high school, the alternative school, and adult ed. And so what they've done is they sort of close the leaky pipeline. And that means that, like, if there's a student at the high school who's sort of not really sure what they want to do and ready to kind of leave, they reach out to the adult ed folks. They're right there and they say, well, this, traditional classroom didn't work. You take them. And then what's great about adult education is the focus is really on sort of career aspirations and building skill sets and all of these things. So there are, and not every school and not every district is doing that. And they do have the benefit of sort of being on the same campus. But those conversations are happening. And I think especially now more than ever, I'm thinking about the future of Maine. We're the oldest state in the nation. We have been the last 6 years running. We have the highest median age. We're a graying population. I think there are industries that are at risk of not having enough people to work in them. So, and school counselors are aware of that. And so I think they're doing the best they can with this work and leaning on partners to kind of have these conversations as well.
Let's see here. Another question. It looks like first, I should go back to that question. Rachel, or anybody else perspective on other programs, ideas in high schools that we've seen from around the nation or
Yeah, I think in Maine, our high schools that have the voc tech schools kind of attached to them do really well with it.
Yeah.
And the high schools that don't necessarily have that aren't as familiar with those non-traditional STEM opportunities. So I know we like to get out to those high schools that don't have the voc and kind of introduce it because it just isn't it's not right there in their backyard. So I think, other employers could do the same. It would help continue to get that word out there that these are real opportunities for these students. So
I think you're right too. And what's great about Waldo County has amazing aspirational work. And so the every fifth grader in that community goes to first the Waldo County Tech Center to job shadow the trades. And then they tour a college in fifth grade. So I think in the past they've gone to Unity, sometimes they go to Orono. And I'm always floored. And so I come in and I do our Claim Your Future financial literacy planning game with them in person as part of this sort of aspiration building. But that's probably the earliest intervention I've seen, a district-wide sort of emphasis and prioritization of this particular sort of part of learning. So they're doing fantastic things. But I think you're right. I think they have the benefit of a tech center in their community that's really robust and vibrant. And so I think you're absolutely on the nail, hitting the nail on the head with, those that are kind of not attached to that world probably need a little bit more direct outreach from STEM community.
Yeah, and I would say across the country, so, what's happening potentially outside of Maine is that the conversation about post-secondary education is changing and has been changing over the last several years. There's a research center at Georgetown University that has been tracking this very closely, sort of Center for Education and Workforce. In fact, they put out a report just over a year ago, which said that Maine Maritime was, one of the top schools in the country for kind of return on your higher ed investment.
They also give out the best financial aid, in case anyone's curious.
Right, but that
No.
passed. So, it was Maine Maritime, and I think Maine Maritime was the only one in Maine. But there was also like a pharmacy school that I think was in Rhode Island. That was another New England school. But this conversation is changing broadly, and guidance counselors are starting to get into that conversation as well, as sort of what is a higher education path look like? What makes sense for you? What's a good fit for you given your interests, your finances, your opportunities? And then there's, a broader workforce development conversation that's going on with respect to job training, retraining, that's being exacerbated by the pandemic as well. Folks changing careers, people coming out of the military, a number of different ways and places that both guidance counselors and then sort of workforce education counselors are beginning to look at the picture a little bit more holistically and thinking about those paths and more equally valuing all of those paths. So that's good for STEM. That's good for a number of non-STEM careers as well.
One question might not be a bad sort of cap-off question for our panelists, maybe each of you. Where do you see the future of STEM jobs in Maine in 10 years? And what skill set do kids need to know now? Maybe we'll start with Rachel on that one.
Well, I think based on our research, what I would say is that the future of STEM jobs in Maine is like multidisciplinary. It's all across the board. There are engineering opportunities, there's healthcare opportunities, there's high tech, there's biotech, there's agriculture, financial services. There's actually no shortage of STEM opportunities. I think, Allie kind of highlighted one challenge for Maine, which is recruiting people into those jobs, making sure that enough folks are being trained to meet the demands. And that's not a problem that's just unique to Maine. This is a problem that exists across the country. There are tons and tons of STEM jobs open in all of these fields all across the country, and we're struggling to get people in them. So it's not the shortage of opportunity, it's making people see these opportunities, value these opportunities, and then trying to give them the skill set and kind of the direction to get on the path so that they can take advantage of them.
Let's see, Dr. Calderwood, how about you in terms of where do you see the future of STEM jobs in 10 years in your sector?
I totally agree. It's across the board, and honestly, I don't think you can go wrong if you end up getting any level of experience in a STEM field. I outlined specifics in my presentation, so I would just go back to those. In agriculture and aquaculture, forestry and clean energy. In agriculture, it's really engineers to help us work with farmers on the equipment and bringing farming into the 21st century. And that is multidisciplinary as well. So it's biology in the field, but it's also the mechanics of harvesting, the mechanics of packing, And then it's also marketing, and market analysis is a whole nother scientific field, and identifying where I should sell my blueberries or where I should sell these apples. Where am I going to get the best price? What makes sense for my business? So the world is an oyster. I don't know.
That's great. All right. Allie, how about you? In terms of 10 years from now, where do you think the future is going to be at Beth Ironworks for?
It's going to be in the trades.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we're all about. Obviously, we have engineers and designers, and we'll always have those. But it's the trades right now that are everybody's screaming for hands-on trades, quality journey work. So and that is STEM. It really is. So it's getting that message out there. That again, that people don't think of it that way, and we need to change that perception. We need them. I know my friends still at Chimbro need them. Reed and Reed needs trades. Everywhere you turn around, the trades they're retiring and they're not coming in quick enough. So.
Right. So now we still have about 10 minutes left for audience participation. So bear with us for participants. This is probably our first time driving a set of polls here, but we're going to go ahead and jump into the audience participation portion. So feel free to fill it out. We're going to take the results of the polls in terms of sort of background information and recommendations and sort of where folks rank some things, and use that as we continue to inform our series moving forward. So we'll go ahead first just to get some demographics and background on folks. Folks can start to slow. You should be seeing a poll now. Somebody scream if you know, and feel free to start entering the poll if you can in terms of background for folks. All right, I'm starting to see data flow in, so that's great. All right. And this is helpful to us to get a sense of who's on the line and basically for folks to fill in on how they relate to the STEM field. So, all right, I think we've had a decent amount of results so far. I'll give it another second. So we'll share the results in terms of if folks are in the STEM field now and where folks have background. So 4-year and graduate degrees seem to be winning out on this one.
No community college.
No community college. So that's interesting. So maybe we need.
That is.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go to our next poll again. If I can get this one going. So we're going to have folks vote on which of the, we'll go ahead and launch the poll. Here we go. So folks can see it. Which of the following do you see as greatest short-term STEM workforce challenges in Maine? So got some options here for folks to think about and fill us in on how they see some of the challenges. Let's see, we've got a horse race between STEM training for trade workers and K through 12. Might be helping us align our priorities here moving forward. But lack of population in Maine seeking STEM education. Slowly taking the lead here. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds for folks to take some votes. All right, I'll go ahead and publish. So folks seem to think lack of population in Maine seeking STEM education is above K through 12 or STEM training for trade workers, but all pretty closely there at the top. So thanks everybody for voting on that. We've got a couple more, so stick with us here, and we'll go to the next one. Number 3. So everybody here gets to vote on where you see the future of STEM jobs in Maine as being the brightest in the next 10 years. So give us your 2 cents. And we can count agriculture and aquaculture to include forestry. That was a egregious oversight on the person myself who wrote the question here. So dare I offend our forestry industry brethren here in the state of Maine. Okay, we've got some energy on this poll. This has definitely got our highest number of folks participating in the question. So, all right, folks have a pretty clear vision here for the future. We'll give it a few seconds here for folks to get votes in as they continue to scream in. All right, I think we've hit our critical mass, so we're going to end and share the results. So this group seems to think renewable energy is definitely the brightest future for Maine in the future. That one surprises me just a little bit, but good to know, and appreciate everybody's perspective on that one. Okay. We are halfway through the polls, folks, so we've got 3 folks, and then we may even be able to give you a few minutes of your afternoon back here. So there we go. We're going to launch this poll. What barriers to STEM skills development do you see in Maine? So what's the biggest barrier that folks see as allowing folks to develop a STEM skill set? We've got cost, adequate training opportunities, or just heck, geographic distance within Maine to STEM opportunities. Got some energy on this poll as well. All right, we'll give it another 10 or 15 seconds here. Still have some results coming in. All right, I think we've hit critical mass here, and it's a really close horse race. Share the results. So it looks like lack of adequate training opportunities seems to be what folks think is a challenge. So something we'll take note of and look at opportunities in the future to talk about training opportunities. Okay, down to the end here, folks, just 2 more polls and we'll get you off to your afternoon. So this is about advantages. What advantages do we have that folks think are most important here in Maine for STEM development? So things that we're doing well. All right. Give folks just a little more time. All right, looks like we're getting close. Give folks maybe another 10, 15 seconds if you haven't thought it over. We're critical mass. Okay, end and share. So folks seem to think Maine's education system is an advantage. So seems like we're doing some things right in that sector. Appreciate everybody's input there. We'll go to our last poll question. All right, launch the poll. What fields do you see as needing more STEM workers in Maine? And this may just reflect your personal background, but feel free to jump on where you think we need more STEM workers. Go. Okay, give it another 10 seconds or so. All right. We've got a tie for a winner here, other, which isn't, which certainly gives folks an option, but renewable energy seems to be, again, another area where folks think we need more STEM workers here in Maine. So appreciate the perspective on that. So that's very helpful, and really appreciate everybody sharing their expertise and perspective with us through the audience participation portion. We got 3 minutes left. So Ben, I'm going to hand it back to you to wrap us out with the end of the program and to talk about where we're headed next.
Thanks so much, Andy. And on behalf of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, we want to thank all our panelists and all our participants today. This was a fantastic and informative discussion. Our second, as Andy indicated, we have 2 more webinars we're going to be offering in regards to STEM and workforce here in the state of Maine. So the other thing is, this was a really good webinar we had today. We have recorded it. It will be available on our website if you want to share it with others, you know, in the future or anything like that. We have a lot of folks that do view these in our recording area on our website. And just in closing, I just want to thank our sponsors for this webinar and our webinar series. Science is Us. We've partnered with them on these STEM workforce development in Maine webinar series, and also to the companies here in the state of Maine: Bangor Savings Bank, Central Maine Power, Eaton and Peabody, Rudman and Winchell, and Mimic Maine Employees Mutual Insurance Group. Thank them all for sponsoring this webinar series as well. We appreciate it, and we'll give you back maybe we're done 2 minutes early today. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.